Right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you and welcome to this Lunch and Learn. Exciting topic today, interesting topic. And we've just got one speaker today as well, so that's a bit different to what we normally do. Today we're thinking about Lancashire's local government changes, and we're looking to learn from how a different organisation has approached this, how they've been promoting climate action, biodiversity, energy, nature, all those things with their local authorities. And Jess Thomas is here from the, sorry, let me get it right, the South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre. And Jess will explain it much better than I can. So we'll hand over straight to Jess and get going, and then I'll share some questions and things at the end. So welcome, Jess, and over to you.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to come and speak to you. I've got quite a few slides, so there's a slight element of death by PowerPoint to this, but I'm going to leave a bit of space for people to ask questions. So, as Harvey said, I'll do sort of the odyssey of South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre, but it'd be really interesting to hear about your experience of what you'd like to do in Lancashire as well, and sort of have a bit more discussion. So, if you just bear with me a second, I'm going to share my slides. Right. Just looking for a thumbs up from Harvey that that's worked. Great stuff. So I can't see you all, but I think if there are questions that pop up, I've got a few points of pausing in between here. So if there are questions, if you pop them on chat, and if loads come up, maybe Harvey, you could just unmute and say, maybe worth a pause there.
No problem.
Fab stuff. All right, so I'm going to talk you through the story of South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre. So I'm Jess Thomas, and I'm the Operations Director for the Centre. I'm based at the University of Sheffield, but you'll see our logos down there. We're a research centre from the University of Sheffield, Sheffield Hallam University, and the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. We were funded by Research England funding initially to deliver this partnership, and I'm going to talk you through initially where the project, where the programme, where the centre came from. And then I'm going to touch a little bit on sort of partnerships, the nature of partnerships, and then some of the things that we've learned. The context setting for this is that the project is coming towards an end, the centre's coming towards an end of its current funding. So we've got lots of lessons learned over a sort of 4-year period. So I'm aware that a lot of you will be more than aware of a lot of these things. So sorry, sort of preaching to the choir to an extent here, but the centre itself was developed in around 2021. So it's developed initially from an academic perspective, from an academic organisation perspective. We have all of this disparate sustainability research ongoing. We know that the local authorities and the combined authority are looking towards net zero targets. And if you remember, if you can cast your minds back to 2021, obviously we had the net zero strategy. There was quite an enabling policy environment. There was political capital gathered around the idea of reaching net zero, and it feels strange to say 4 to 5 years later we're in a slightly different situation, but that the sort of driver behind creating this research centre was that there must be more collaborative action to achieve just transition. So the just transition bit is really important for our work to net zero. So we've got our lovely Venn diagram there. The centre itself was designed around a systems approach, which I'm going to go into a little bit more, but also very much about building relationships and collaboration. So as I said, I don't know whether we've got any academic colleagues on the Lunch and Learn call today, but a lot of movement went on between building things between different disciplines, but also bringing in partners. So a lot of organisation went on to build this bid. Just say it was also funded by something called the Research England Development Fund, which funds innovative approaches. So we were funded to take an innovative approach to a difficult problem rather than just sustainability research. So again, slight preaching to the choir here, but 2 nice diagrams that we like to pull up because they're colourful. But sustainability is a wicked problem. So highly complex, very interconnected, in some ways impossible to entirely solve. and isn't tackled with traditional linear approaches. So on our left-hand side, we might have what we might recognise sometimes in some research environments or some sort of linear problem-solving environments, and we very much take an approach that we need to tackle the messiness and work with the messiness to be able to address sustainability challenges in the region. So our next slide here, I'm really sorry if you can't see this. This is the biggest I could get it, but I'm going to read the focal problem in the centre there. So this was our starting point: a lack of collaboration and a co-production between disciplines. I can't even read it myself. Academics and businesses has led to slower than desired progress for climate resilience in South Yorkshire. So this is a piece of work that we did in the initial phases of South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre, of looking at the system map, the enablers that sit around us around this focal problem. Essentially that, and again, I'd really be interested in hearing your thoughts later on, that a lack of collaboration is slowing the progress towards a just transition to net zero. But there's different points of the system in which we can intervene. Primarily, we're looking at the perspective here of where does research apply, what points is research useful, and at what point can we influence collaboration. So that was our starting point, and if you're interested in that, I can definitely share a more readable version of the system map, but to sort of tell you where we'd started. So as I said, we've been funded to take two key novel approaches. So we've got two key aspects to our approach. One is that we support interdisciplinary system-aware research, and the second is that we use a novel knowledge exchange approach that's open and collaborative and iterative. And these two things sound very clear and simple, but I can assure you that they are not. So the first is that a lot of resource was put towards creating interdisciplinary working between both within an academic institution, but between two academic institutions. That was identifying those points of collaboration where we could truly work in an interdisciplinary way, and that required quite a lot of resource. And the second was this novel knowledge exchange approach. So again, for those that know sort of knowledge exchange terminology within academic institutions, it's looking at how the research that's been developed within the institutions is disseminated to the wider world, the wider public. Our novel approach was very much around this idea of it being iterative and system aware, and very much also based on the foundations of relationships. So what's going to be the legacy of this work? It's been funded for 4 years, but what are we building that allows that collaboration to continue beyond the lifetime of the centre? Over on the right hand side here, we have probably one of my favourite images from the South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre. This is our thematic structure. So before we had this image, I don't know if you can all see me, but I'd wave my fingers around and talk about intersections, but we now have this nice image. Along the top there, you'll see that there's 3 themes: residential, energy and transport, food systems, environmental restoration, and industrial and commercial decarbonisation, so emissions there. These were 3 thematic topics that were identified through a theory of change process that we ran with our local authorities. So where are the sort of highest emitting sectors, and therefore the highest impact if we can reduce those emissions? So we're very much targeting net zero and carbon emissions reduction in that first instance. We were able then to gather academics around these 3 thematic areas. So we had academic leads for those 3 thematic areas. And some of you may have had interaction with projects that look at sort of, very clear focused thematic areas of sustainability. So you might have worked on projects that are looking at retrofit, and that has lots of benefit because it allows people to consolidate around a single theme, allows your partnerships to be very clear. What the Sustainability Centre wanted to do was look at the breadth, and there's plenty more that we could have added onto this, and perhaps have a discussion about where health outcomes and co-benefits would be in here as well. But these were the 3 areas that the local authorities felt that there was opportunity to make interventions on. So we had a number of projects nestled in there, which I've got a nice slide coming up in a moment to explain that. And then down on our left-hand side, we've got what we sometimes call our work packages. I sometimes call them the system lenses. These were also focused around academic expertise, but what they allowed us to do was to think about the system challenges of applying any research findings or programmes in our thematic areas. So the example that I'll pull up is thinking about retrofit. What are the policy and governance implications of that? What's the just transition implications? you know, and data-driven and supply chain innovation. So when we're thinking about the real-world application of our research findings, we're thinking about all of these different ways that there are going to be trade-offs in implementation. I think this is a really important and special part of SYSC. So the way that we deliver that, so I've shown you our sort of thematic structure and how our research projects are structured, is we had some sort of key mechanisms, some key activities that we undertook. So we were resourced and we focused our activity on building relationships. So that's between partners and academics. A lot of that was obviously through events. We've got some nice pictures of people talking and getting on the right-hand side here. Generating regionally relevant research. So we were looking to surface regional challenges. Now, a lot of these regional challenges aren't just specific to South Yorkshire, but there are specificities that are embedded within the regional context to these sustainability challenges, such as the prevalence of SMEs in our economy, for example, and large advanced manufacturing aspects within our economy when we're not coastal, for example. So when we think about energy generation, etc. So we wanted these to be sort of founded in the challenges that were recognised in the region, whilst also supporting some of our implementing partners, such as local authorities, to consider different challenges they may not have already considered, different points of intervention. And then creating and supporting collaboration spaces and structures. So some of this looked like working groups on specific challenges. We supported a research group between our two academic institutions on air quality. So that was called Sheffield Air. But what that allowed us to do was bring in partners from the region. So specifically at one point, Sheffield City Council, to come and hear about the full breadth of what we might need to consider in terms of the intersection between climate change and air quality, and what that means for health, what that means for reaching net zero and emissions, etc. So we were very much focused on creating these spaces and places where collaboration was at the forefront. So I promised you here a sort of bringing to life of how some of our research works. This is retrofit. I think Harvey will be able to share all of the slides. So there is a lot of information in here, but I'll run through these, but hopefully we'll be able to share them. I'm happy to share bits and pieces. So within our theme, we had one of our projects that was working within our civil engineering department to model a retrofit optimization sort of platform. So what's the best way to deliver retrofit within civil engineering, thinking about how you optimize the delivery of retrofit programming. In and of itself, that could have been a really valuable piece of work. But what we did was work across disciplines so that it intersected on different considerations. So within the Department of Politics, who was leading our policy and governance piece, we conducted a household energy use survey. So looking at consumer habits and behaviours and attitudes, covering fuel poverty and energy decadence. Now, as a side point, that was really useful for us because that would be a very difficult piece of research around consumption habits for local authorities to undertake. So by removing it slightly, it was a bit easier for us to deliver that piece of work. But it allows us to think about the different ways that retrofit will be delivered. Our colleagues over at the Sheffield Hallam University worked on our Just Transition work package, and they were looking at the governance models and particularly the skills that are required to deliver at scale. So where are those interventions required to build the skill base to deliver on the retrofit that is required for the region? Within data driven, we were looking at establishing the baseline for those emissions. So thinking about it in the round, if we're looking at moving targets towards net zero, how does this retrofit programme contribute to that, and at what scale is it required? And then finally, obviously thinking about supply chain innovation. So thinking about the material fits that are required for retrofits, so the air source heat pumps, etc., and other materials. What's the supply chain implications? Is there any opportunity to bring any of that closer to home, reducing sort of the embedded emissions, but also thinking about skills and workforce within that? So being able to deliver these in the round packages of considerations was a really key element of South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre. I'm going to pause really briefly because that's my sort of like, this is the structure, and just see if there was any specific related questions there. I don't know if you can you do hands up on a Teams call? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a couple there already. So yeah, David, you go first.
Jess, I was just curious. Sorry, Jess, I was just curious about the extent to which these various initiatives, how well coordinated there are they are, or to what extent are people working more in isolation? I mean, these are all really interesting examples of engaging academics and in different parts of the two universities. Just wonder about how that all works in terms of joined upness.
And is it David? Yeah. Are
Yes.
you an academic yourself?
Yes. Yeah. Cumbria.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll understand some of the difficulty of the mechanism. We got better at it over the 4 years. You know, I'm going to come on to a piece later about trust being currency that creates efficiency within the system, and relationships being foundational to that. So it's in some points it's harder, in some points it's easy. We found sometimes when academics as individuals are able to get on, it's easier to make that work. But we also created structures and systems around that. So the centre itself was resourced to take a lot of the sort of operational burden of doing the work, and ensure that those connections existed. So we ran quarterly collaboration meetings where all the academics would come together in person, and we'd encourage that collaboration. And we'd also be presenting a lot of that work holistically to our partners, so they'd have to be sort of thinking about how that's presented. So I mean, I could, you know, that could be a conversation we could have for a whole hour, but it's difficult, when we got better at it is the short answer.
And just quickly noticing that you use the word partnership at the outset, and I like that, because I think there's a tendency sometimes to talk about projects, and it's a different kind of relationship, and you emphasize the importance of the relationships. And so
I do bang that drum quite often. Yeah,
a real advocate for partnership working around these sorts of things. Yeah.
Thanks, David. Sorry,
thanks, David. Erica, did you have a question?
Yes, please. So I'm Dr. Erica Lewis. I'm an academic at the University of Cumbria. I am also, for my sins, a former Lancaster City Council leader and Lancashire County Council, Lancashire County Councillor. So part of what I'm interested in here is how much of the facilitation is assisted by the mayoral combined. Neither Lancashire nor Cumbria currently have one of these. Cumbria is closer than Lancashire. And I guess, and I have an ongoing concern about how that lack of, and because we lack that shared policy thinking across those place-based areas, how much that's hurting us. So I'm wondering, how important is the mayoral combined to the work that you've been doing?
It's fundamental and foundational to an extent that's the sort of application conduit for our work. Yeah. However, there was a lot of work at the beginning of the centre in terms of getting the interdisciplinary functioning. So you know, I've got a few slides right at the end of some of our reflections and recommendations, and some of those are really around that. There were some designs potentially where some of our staff members would have been embedded in the combined authority, and I think that would have helped a lot. And again, some of it has been reliant on where those relationships have functioned, where people understand, you know, the policymakers or some of our practitioners, deliverers within the combined authority have understood how academia and research can be applied in these situations. But yes, again, another massive question, that there definitely is the mismatch that has existed, and some of this has been working with the Coalition of the Willing.
Yeah, cool. Sure. Thank you very much.
Fab. Great stuff. I'll move on. I mean, I've realised that already that I'm not going to get through all of my slides, so I'm going to skip some of these. But so that was sort of this is what we've done. Here's a nice slide with some numbers. Everybody likes these things, don't they? So it's to sort of shows the scale. The thing that I really want to draw your attention to here is that within our bids, the Mayoral Combined Authority committed £600,000 worth of capital, and we had £400,000 worth of revenue within our RED funding bid, within the Research England funding bid. This allowed us to be responsive, and it was really, really key. So a lot of our research projects, again, for the academics on the call, will know that it's been pre-designed. There's been some level of consultation, not co-production, but it allowed us to co-produce research. And we've really seen the pieces of work that have really flown, of those pieces that have come later on as the centre has grown and has allowed us to be adaptable. So to say that's really, really key. We've got a mailing list of over 800,000, goodness me, 800 people. Can you imagine? The whole of South Yorkshire signed up to us. And we've connected with 500 people through our events. We had about 48 events, 21 roundtables, 27 other events. 60% of audience would be returning audiences. So we say with a lot of confidence there that we've developed an existing network, and that's spread over the sort of 4 years. So there are relationships that have developed there. So I think this is the section that I'm going to whiz through, if that's okay with everybody. Obviously, we'll still have some time at the end, but I wanted to briefly touch on how we've conceived of impact. Now, obviously, the research funding stipulated a series of KPIs. I haven't included that in this presentation. I'm happy to sort of discuss some of those. But when we came in, we thought about what's going to be the legacy of this work. So we took a system change approach to our impact, thinking about the 3 horizons. So where are we working across these 3 horizons? And again, I'm not going to sort of go through the exact model, but it's thinking about where these interventions, sometimes called the niche, horizon 2, this blue thing, where are those points of intervention that we can develop that create interventions within the system that allowed us to build what is in green in the viable future here. We've only been funded for 4 years, so ultimately we're not going to see the real results of any system change here, but we want to be tracking, thinking about where we're creating those interventions. I think this is important if anyone is considering developing something similar, but like defining your impact. So we thought about impact as the demonstrable and attributable effects, change or benefit to the economy, society, public policy, health or environment beyond academia that results from our activity. That's quite broad, but it really allowed us to think about both how we deploy our mechanisms, but also the impact of the research. So I like my diagram here. I'm really interested in how we think about impact and the implications of these kind of investments. But we're looking at the enablers of change, because really what we want to see is that, in a system change way, what is enabling change to happen? Because our starting presenting problem was that change isn't happening because collaboration isn't there. This coordination isn't happening. So if we can change those aspects, what speeds things up? What allows things to move? So we very much looked at what's the impact for our research output, but also what's the impact of our strategic approach. We had a series of activities which I've touched on slightly, but very much initially our interdisciplinary evidence-based research that we took as a first principle, relational and place-bound focus. We delivered events, so that looked at lots of different things. We ran an annual conference, which was really, really successful, and like I say, we had a lot of returning individuals coming to those. We developed policy briefings, academic translation. So in sort of the second year in, one of our staff members left and we were able to redesign a role. So we've got a senior impact and policy officer that does a lot of that translation. That's been so key as we've come towards the end of our programme, but also focusing on network and partnership development. So, and then I'm just going to take you really briefly through some of our impact stories. So what we think we have achieved. We've got here, the first one is collaborative demonstrators. So this is one of our projects. We were able to use £250,000 of the capital funding to work with our local authorities. So we had an engineer who developed a heat storage, developed a heat storage solution in a lab, but wanted to be able to make use of that in a real world situation. So we developed a partnership between Sheffield City Council. Again, I don't know if anyone knows. I know Xander's on the call, so he knows this project really, really well. But I don't know if anyone else knows South Yorkshire. But within Sheffield, there's this area called Gleadless Valley that received quite a bit of investment for regeneration writ large. We were able to form a partnership with them, so that there's now an opportunity to test this technology in situ. They're working with the Residents and Tenants Association. There's dual benefit here. So for the academic research, they're able to assess the impact of implementation, but also for the region, they're able to provide a demonstrator project. So what might this look like in situ, but also what might we consider when we scale? From that work, we were then able also to add in some of our social researchers. So looking at some of those social barriers to adopting new technologies, which is often an afterthought, right? So when we're thinking about technology readiness levels, we're not always thinking about societal readiness levels. So it's been a really good example of being able to combine these different approaches. So collaborative demonstrators has been one of the ways we look at. As I've mentioned, thinking about our events, so creating opportunity. So what comes from the events is what we're thinking rather than necessarily what's achieved there. So this is from our Sheffield Air event, so working with Sheffield City Council to refresh their air quality strategy, bringing together interdisciplinary researchers, but very much focused on air quality. and work has come from that. We've actually ended up being able to sponsor a fellow that's now embedded at Sheffield City Council in supporting them of the expansion of their scope of their air quality strategy. So they're moving from just thinking about tailpipe emissions to thinking about indoor air quality as well, and the health outcomes associated with that. So we've been able to sort of form these partnerships there. I do know I'm rushing through these. And then the final piece is being able to add value. So when I started the role at the centre, I said, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We have to understand where the gaps are and try and work out how the dedicated resource that's being funded can be deployed to best support that. So this was using our capital fund to fund some sensors for works that were ongoing in a partnership with Doncaster City Council. They were doing deep retrofit on 21 houses. We were able to support some of our academics to go in and do some real-time monitoring and support of the implications of indoor air quality. But what we were able to do there is use money that we had available to buy capital equipment on a quick turnaround. So it provided and demonstrated value to our partners, but it also allowed us to move forward with research projects and thinking about that scaling. So I'm not going to, unless there's any really burning questions, so I wasn't going to stop then. But I was going to sort of move on to this question. So Harvey and I spoke briefly about this question of galvanising partnership for action. This is far more discursive because all I've got is two slides here of a little visual of the sort of scope, and this isn't our entire partnership basis. So before we started, obviously we've got the sort of key ones there. Manchester didn't stay with us for the entirety of the project, but we got a lot of letters of support. So for those of you that are au fait with the building of academic research funding bids, you'll know that you build all these letters of support and you bring in lots of partners that say this is a great thing and we'll do this. And some of this is some of those pictures of some of those partners. But then we've worked with them in different ways. So you'll see that we've got our local authority partners. We've got some of some regional industry, but we've also got some community groups. So Regather is a co-op that's based in Sheffield that focuses on food. We've got E.ON, which is an international organisation, but working on heat districts in Sheffield. Again, Alcal-Molly, I don't know if anyone will know that, is a farm that's looking at regenerative process in Sheffield, but there's a full variety of partners. And what we were able to do is deploy that partnership on individual projects. But then we have then got the sort of some of the whole of this partnership being mobilised towards working at a regional level. And that really came to the fore when we ran our events. So a main piece that's come back to us as a sort of value of SYSC existing is that these in-person events, which are about between 150 to 200 people attending each one, that people were making new relationships. So this was one of our baseline metrics that we use to assess our impact. Are people connecting with people they otherwise wouldn't? So this would perhaps be the limitation of thinking of just working on retrofit, for example. You do create strong networks, but it's very much within one single focus. What we're able to do here is create this cross sectoral partnership that allowed us to think in this system aware way. So that's a sort of demonstration. I think I've got there's some nice pictures of people getting on here. I want to speak to the point that maybe David had brought up briefly, in that we tried to set up the centre in a way that was non-transactional. So there is a standard way of working in incredibly resource constrained, capacity restrained organisations. So that's across public sector. It's obviously across the universities. It's across particularly VCSE sector that we see, and to an extent within our SMEs and industry as well. That these partnerships do end up being quite transactional. So how do we break out of that? How do we think about what partnership is and what legacy we're building? So we very much wanted to create environments where people connected together. We had formal agreements and partnerships with some of our, formal agreements with some of our partners to deliver specific research projects. But we also asked them, provided platforms for them to share learning at all of our events. So people were exposed to the work and the breadth of work that's going on at the region, at a regional level. So, I mean, I haven't really picked that apart, but I wondered if people had some questions there of what the nature of working at a regional level, working on this full scope of sustainability, and everything that I've sort of covered there. I just wanted to pause briefly to see if there were any questions.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, great great presentation. It's such a huge amount to squeeze into
I do
small
have
amount
more.
of time.
I
Yeah.
would like to get onto the recommendations, but I just wanted to pause there to see if
Yeah.
there was any questions on that. Sorry, can you hear the background noise?
No.
Okay.
No, I think that's. I think everybody's saving the questions for the end.
Fab. Onto the recommendations. Okay. Great stuff. So I've got here 5 key lessons that I drew out halfway through the centre. My question was going to be here, how much of these resonate? But this was sort of really key things that were coming up for us as we were starting to deliver. So I'm just going to run through those briefly. The first of these is that our collaboration needs to start from a place that acknowledges regional capacity deficits. So collaboration takes a lot of work. Asking people to turn up for meetings regularly can be burdensome. So how do we ensure that the work that we're asking to do and the collaboration that we're trying to build is acknowledged of the constraints that exist? Where can we add resource? So we had 6 staff members. So where we were able to use some of those services, one of our administrative officer provided secretariat services to something called the Regional Retrofit Working Group. So that was embedded in the combined authority, but we were able to provide some of our resources there that address some sort of capacity deficit. But I think in thinking about designing that really came up for us in that, we turn up as a new initiative. We're here to collaborate, but people don't have a lot of space and time to collaborate. This is very much the drum that I bang, and was very much what I came into this job saying, that this needs to be a foundational aspect of the work that goes on. Relationships are the bedrock of effective action. Without understanding and building on sort of relational practice, you will lose some of the benefit that you may deliver in a small time frame. But actually, if you really build on that, there's going to be longevity to the work that you do. So I quite often talk about relationships creating trust, and trust as being a form of capital that creates efficiency within the system. So I think, starting off on these initiatives, that became really, really clear to us. And I think, sorry, I've forgotten your name, Erica maybe alluded to some of this, but variations in pace. So the demand for results is mismatched between different organisations. So when you're trying to work between, even different academic institutions, but also within local authorities, the combined authority, or industry partners or SMEs, there's different expectations of turnarounds. There's obviously sort of, policy cycles that we're trying to work for. So it makes coherence harder. And I think that we should be considering that when thinking about building these initiatives. And then perhaps a more abstract point is that this work is really countercultural to the sort of dominant institutional cultures. So we find that within academia, the academic career pathway doesn't necessarily push people towards interdisciplinary working. It doesn't push people towards sort of slower working with regional partners necessarily, depending on the institution that you're in, but sort of the relationship to being a civic institution, that might not always be so prevalent. So the work that we're trying to do is countercultural. So I think some of this is just saying to acknowledge that. My note that I've got here is to co-produce truly. This kind of research takes time, tolerance of ambiguity, and generosity. And those are qualities and values that really need to be considered, and they are countercultural. So I think that acknowledgement in and of itself at the start is really important. And then the final one here is building a shared language and understanding could enable and embolden institutional and cross-sectoral action. It's not going to deliver outputs and outcomes immediately, and does take quite a lot of work. Internally, we developed our shared language initially. So what did we mean by systems change? What did we mean by net zero? Allowing us to have consistency in the way that we're working with people, but also allowing that to be flexible as we grow. I mean, here I've got a section of does this resonate with anyone before I move on to sort of the final phase, which is probably another 5 minutes. If there's just no points, oh yes, I've got a thumbs up.
Yeah, I was just going to add saying, yeah, particularly that last one, shared language and understanding is definitely something that we've come across in the water environment sector. Definitely, yeah. The environment agency speak a different language to United Utilities, to the charities and communities. So yeah, that one definitely stood out for me. Did you have to come in, Grace?
No, so well, that was an accident. But do you not think there's too much? Just generally, if you keep language simple and straightforward, and not like the in-word speak. Do you know what I mean? You know, like if you're a lawyer or a doctor, everybody knows that you're not going to know a lot of the terms because they're very specific. But sometimes they generate new terms in the English language that really are not needed because they don't actually, they're not needed. I can't think of any one specific word I can think of at the moment, unfortunately, but do you know, like this intergenerational, whatever, I just think it's too heavily loaded on let's make a complicated word. Does that sound sense or not?
I think so. I think the point that we're trying to make here is that we're bringing together mostly professionals that have their own institutional language and their own institutional terms, but we're trying to work towards a shared goal. So I think I hear what you're saying, but I think there's some acknowledgement that there is difference between the terms that people are bringing to the same space. And so having that discussion or trying to create some shared language. And sometimes, yeah, I agree, sometimes the reduction and clarification and simplification of the language helps, but other times things are, you know, complexity requires complex thinking, and you can get quite lost in some of that. So I think I understand. I think what I was the point I was trying to make is that there should be a first principle of acknowledging that there isn't a shared language usually when you're bringing all these cross-sectoral partners together.
Well, that's your view, right? Fair enough. Yeah, I mean,
Thanks, Grace. We'll move on to the next section, and then there will be time at the end for further discussion if you want to.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm aware there's a lot of me speaking here. So if you've got your phones and you can scan a QR code, here's a QR code. As I mentioned at the beginning, the centre was funded for 4 years. We started in 2022, so we're coming towards an end this summer. It will continue in some form, but it won't be fully resourced beyond the end of July. The main tangible output that we've created is this consolidated research report. So 40 projects have been sort of brought together. I will obviously share this round, but there is a QR code that you can scan there to be able to access the report on our website. The full report, as a warning, is 244 pages long. So there is a lot of material in there. It's been structured around these thematic 6 chapters, so bringing in some of the work packages, but also some of the themes. And then each chapter has been structured with a policy narrative report, a series of policy recommendations, but then case studies as well, which is why it's sort of grown up. And I think that the reason I wanted to mention this is that this feels like sort of an element of the ending of the centre, but actually we're already finding that it's an incredibly useful resource in being able to pull together the full breadth and scope of the research that we've done into one single document. It's been designed so that people can, you know, that might just be interested in sustainable food can drill down on one particular topic, but also it allows us to connect together the different areas. So just a little snapshot of the visual element of it, which again is really important, having something that is visual and pretty. I'm going to hold up my copy. I don't know if people can see it. I can't see my screen, but hopefully you can see this. But it's a very nice, tangible piece to have, and we've been able to hand these out. We're running quite a lot of dissemination sessions on the research findings that are specific within here. This is just one of our projects. Here's an example of some of our policy recommendations, and this has been really key because this has allowed us to pull together specific research findings from our individual projects and then put forward what might continue from the centre beyond what we've done. So here's what we think as a centre, as this a collection of academics and our partners, this is what we think needs to happen. So almost the end of me speaking. I just wanted to pull up, and this hasn't been published, so you are actually the first people to see this, and I might have to take these 2 slides off at the end. We're in the midst of finalising our evaluation report. We've got, I've pulled out 8 of our key recommendations here, and I wanted to leave this of, you know, if you are considering doing something along the lines of what the centre's doing, you know, these are the if we were to go back and start again, these are some of the things that we consider. Some of the things I've already covered, so I'm just going to read through them and just discuss them really briefly. So defining the boundaries of the centre's role in the regional ecosystem. A centre like this doesn't ultimately, you know, accelerate a just transition to net zero. That requires the whole partnership, but where are you going to fit in? Who are going to be the key partners that you're going to play to? The centre totally could have worked just with the 4 local authorities and worked with a combined authority in a secondary way. We chose to work with this umbrella sort of combined authority, thinking about South Yorkshire as a place rather than the individual local areas. And again, this sounds like something will be interesting in consideration for where you are. As I've mentioned, this flexible fund was absolutely key in our ability to be responsive, and I would definitely ensure that if co-production is a key value to you, you would include that. Carefully plan and invest in the resources required to deliver at scale and across the scope of climate action. You know, again, if you want to go always for a single thematic area, but if you're going to be thinking about full scale, how do you adapt to building health, for example? How do you resource this work? And that requires staff at the centre to coordinate. Investing in medium and long-term outcomes avoids being sidetracked by policy changes and pace differentials. So as I said, for example, the Warm Homes Plan that came out earlier this year has become a really big focus for our local authority and other delivery partners in that space, but may have sidetracked some of our work if we were just working towards something that was going to be delivered and developed now. So thinking about what will those outcomes be beyond the lifetime of the centre is quite key. This is something we didn't do. So if you are taking a systems change approach, specialist knowledge in systems change is really key. So we probably should have had a work package in understanding and building that speciality in. This is a point perhaps for staff, but it's also for the sort of broader delivery. But working across organisational boundaries is tiring and resource intense. So being able to set baselines to track how smaller shifts are occurring and what the legacy of the work will be is really important. So all of our events that we run, we deliver or we provide pulse surveys afterwards. Did you learn something new? Did you make new connections? Is this applicable to your work? Are just some examples of the kinds of questions that we ask. And then we monitor, you know, how useful are our events? How much are people making connections? A side point that I think is useful but can be a bit boring is that we built our own contact relationship manager. So tracking those relationships. How are relationships growing? How are people connecting and what role are we playing within that? Big fan of in-person events. We know everything's changed since COVID, but I really believe it is where the magic happens. And the example that I gave you earlier of working in Gleadless Valley with our heat demonstrator is because people met together over some sandwiches and were able to have conversations about what might be possible. So I think that's really, really key. And then this final piece of collaboration requires trust, generosity, and additional time, and it needs to be accounted for. So they're quite high-level recommendations, and I'm happy to share the evaluation report when it comes out. But you know, there you go. That's your sort of first audience to see that beyond the team. But I am aware that I've spoken for quite a long time. I think I'll stop sharing, and then maybe we could open for any questions that people have. Does that work?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. That was fantastic. Yeah, like I said before, a huge amount to cover in a relatively short space of time. So thank you for doing that. I think you've done a great job of it. Yes, some great recommendations and learning from that as well. Some of the other things that struck me were about having that big idea at the beginning. Obviously, talked about partners and funding. I think that system thinking approach, I think it is important, although it's very difficult. But I think being able to take that helicopter view and look at, sometimes you're trying to change things, but unless you can see that big picture, you don't really understand where the actual problem is. You might be tackling something you think's the problem, but there might be other problems elsewhere that you don't see. So having that systems, that big picture approach, I think it is really important. There's a couple of questions in the chat. My question was going to be around sort of the driver. So who was the driving force behind it? Was it one of the universities, or where did the idea come from?
Yeah, it was from the universities.
Yeah.
So within the University of Sheffield, we have a regional partnerships team. It's been named various things over the last couple of years. But it was thinking on the basis of that strategy of how we work with regional partners. And as I said, the particular political capital policy driver around sustainability and net zero at that time. So it did very much come from the universities, but with an acknowledgement probably from years worth, and this is when we think about legacy work, years worth of working, if these things require collaboration, so it keeps on falling off, how can we create a mechanism that supports that in the long term?
Yeah. Great, thanks. So a couple of questions in the chat then. We've got Jane who said, Have you involved volunteer groups and charities whose work is about sustainability?
Yes, to a lesser extent. I think that was the point I was trying to make earlier on, where you decide which part of the ecosystem you want to target. There is some, I don't know whether it's the same where you are, but in Sheffield, South Yorkshire, there's some hesitance from community organisations to work with academia. There's a bit of a legacy of extractive working sometimes. Sometimes it's done well. So what we've managed to do is work with volunteer groups and charities in specific thematic areas, and one of those is within our air quality. So there's an air quality community group that, you know, sort of advocates for the rights of the local community, and they've been able to be involved with our work. We have, oh gosh, I've forgotten what the climate action group is called in Sheffield, but involved in our events. So we get a lot of attendance at events. So they're part of our network and broad work, but they haven't shown up quite as much in our research programs, with a few anomalies in there. So thinking about the co-op, the Regather co-op that we were talking about, the food work, they have been involved.
That's great, thanks. So another question, we've got a question from Caris. So it's looking like we'll have a combined mayoral authority in Lancashire in the future. Do you have any thoughts on how we can make the most of this to focus on climate action collaboratively? And maybe if I could add on to that, it's how receptive were the authority to including climate action as a big theme?
Sure. I think that you're in a better position in working with them as they form. So the combined authority had been around obviously for a few years when SYSC started. We were sent off track slightly by the net zero director resigning, and they didn't replace that role well, they've actually only just recruited. The person's only just started, and that person is now the Director for Energy and Environment. So it's a different scope of role. So I think being able to understand where it will sit in terms of policy department will really help you integrate that work. I think what's worked for us is saying that, you know, we are a kind of front door for the academic institutions for sustainability related, and we can pick apart the term sustainability, but sustainability related work, and that's been incredibly helpful. So it doesn't mean individual academics are, you know, trying to contact individual policy officers or delivery officers at the combined authority. It means that it's been a central point of contact, which has really allowed us to coordinate the work. So I'd say that is really, really key in having that proposition, particularly as a combined authority is forming and you understand the structure that's going to form around that. I think advocating for having that contribute, and it doesn't have to be to academia, right? It can be to all of those who are interested in working on climate action. I think the stretch and scope of combined authorities and the incoming increased devolved powers means that they are just as resource stretched as our local authorities and other organisations, and being able to provide that efficiency is supportive.
Yeah, so I think that's important to acknowledge that it's going to be a fight to make sure that it's seen as seen as important.
I think another important point that I alluded to perhaps was that we've seen health become the predominant factor. So the co-benefits of climate action towards health, particularly in South Yorkshire, we have a mayor that is it's made its way into his manifesto twice about sort of health outcomes of the citizens of South Yorkshire. So depending on the politics and policies of what forms in Lancashire, I think being able to consider how to tap into something that goes beyond perhaps traditional climate action, but understand the sort of broader societal, economic and social elements of that is really important.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I suppose that comes back to the language as well, doesn't it? And how we talk about these challenges, but also the benefits that we get from this type of work. So are there any other? Oh, David's got a question there as well. So noticing the importance.
Just covered that, Jess, on the health. Jess, you've just mentioned the importance of links to health and other relevant thematic or the sectoral networks. I think that's something that we're noticing in Cumbria with the Health Determinants Research Collaborative that the university is involved in, and the Institute of Health at the university. And Eric and I are in the Institute of Business, Industry and Leadership, which has project management, law, business and engineering within it. But the tendency, even within the university, for these things to operate in isolation of each other, and the challenges of keeping people informed about what we're doing and where those connections to other disciplines is important, but not just within the university, also externally in terms of local authorities and the voluntary sector and business as well.
Yeah, completely. And you are not going to be able to connect with everything.
No,
I think there's an element of operationalizing humility within the work that you're doing. So understanding that you will only be able to provide benefit in one particular area, and that some of the networks are far better placed. So I think what you kind of mentioned there are sort of specific thematic networks. So when you're talking about like health related, the Sustainability Centre was never meant to be something that competes with that, but thinking how you signpost from there. So if we've got this coordinated baseline, we're looking at how you create spaces and places for collaboration, and how you bring together interdisciplinary research that is accessible. Those are the two mechanisms that really we're focusing on, but we happen to be focusing on sustainability. But yeah, absolutely. And the shifts that we've seen even in the 4 years, it does make it difficult. You do need to, I think, whatever comes next, we'll need to adapt to new networks and new initiatives, a new language that develops. It's a bit of I don't know, I feel like it's a bit of a get out answer there, because it is incredibly complicated, but I acknowledge what you're alluding to.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, David. I think we might need to have that as the last question. I'm sure there might be other things that people want to hear about. But Jess, if you're able to share the slides and everything, we can send that out to everybody.
I'll do that now, yeah.
With the link to the report as well.
Sure.
And I think for members of the network, if you want to maybe think about, so okay, we've heard from Jess, what ideas is this giving you about what we need to be doing in Lancashire, and then send those, or send thoughts, ideas to Naomi through the LancsCan email, because again, like Jess was saying, we're at the beginning in Lancashire, so it's a good opportunity to start pulling ideas together. There's the local authority climate officers group and other sort of networks maybe that we need to tap into, and yeah, I think it's a good opportunity anyway to be thinking about these types of things. So huge thanks to you, Jess. It was really interesting and great to hear about the work you've been doing in South Yorkshire. Yeah, let's see what's going to happen in Lancashire.
Yep. I'll share our website link as well, because there's if you're interested in any of the particular topics, projects, there's loads on there.
Yeah.
And if there are other questions people want to reach out, then maybe Harvey, you could send it on to me.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thank you. Sam, where's Sam? Sam's going to be hosting the next Lunch and Learn. Could you just give us a list, Sam, and with the themes of those as well?
Yeah.
And again, if anybody wants to get involved or present or whatever, then get in touch.
Definitely. So the next one is focused on green spaces in and around Blackpool, because we felt like we hadn't had too much focus on the Blackpool area throughout these Lunch and Learn. So we've got some ideas of some parks projects that we've worked with before, but if anyone is working specifically in and around Blackpool and wants to highlight their work, then please get in touch with me, because it'd be great to give a spotlight to what you're doing. And I think that leads quite nicely into just reminding everyone of what really these Lunch and Learns are all about. It's fundamentally about spotlighting, highlighting the amazing work that happens throughout the network, and as we've been hearing from Jess, to encourage collaboration, partnership working, to ensure that we're all doing the best and maximising our impact across the county. So that's July's. Then in September, our focus will be on voluntary action. So again, if there's any voluntary groups that if you're part of a voluntary group, if you have voluntary groups that you work with that you think it'd be great to share their work and promote what they do. And then November, we've got housing, and then January 2027, which feels far away, but I'm sure it will be here before we know it, will be focused on energy. So yes, we'll be sending out to all the LancsCan leadership team, will be sending out information just for anyone who wants to join, but we'll also send out the programme to all of the Lancashire membership through the newsletter, Naomi. So yeah, that more information about that will be shared in good time. I'll just get you the date for the July one so you can put it in your calendar. So it's a bit earlier in July. It's Thursday the 16th of July. So yes, if you want to, if you any information about any parks, green spaces, groups in Blackpool, then we'd love to highlight their work.
Thanks, Sam. And we're nearly at past. Has anybody got any other anything else they want to share? Grace, I think you're muted. We can't, Grace, we can't. You're still muted, Grace. Anybody else got any other events to share or any information? You want to type it in the chat, Grace? Yes, Karen.
Hello, just to apologise to Jess if I've offended her by what I said. I will look up the SYSC and see if I can have a better understanding of what you were trying to say. Let's put it like that. So
no offence taken at all. No offence taken at all.
Thanks, Grace. Karis, did you want to say something? I can see you've added the link to the Morecambe Bay curriculum.
Yeah, I was just going to say, anyone who's interested in young people and climate action, you're really welcome to come along to the conference on the 3rd of July. Tickets are free, so I've put the link in the chat.
Yeah, no problem. I don't apologise for plugging it. That's what this end bit's for. So thank you for plugging it. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. That's the end of the hour. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I will also just quickly add, this is going to be my last Lunch and Learn. I'm actually changing jobs at the end of July. Sorry, not the end of July, the end of June. Starting a new job in July. So I will be moving out of Lancashire, or with work anyway. So I probably won't be able to attend these in future, but I will try and stay in touch. But yeah, thank you all for joining these events and contributing, and yeah, it's been really enjoyable. I'm sure Lancashire will continue to go from strength to strength. And thank you particularly to all the volunteers who are part of the leadership group to try and keep things moving. So thank you very much. And on that bombshell, as they used to say in Top Gear, we'll leave you to the rest of your day. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you. And thanks, Harvey, for all your hard work on Lunch and Learn.
Yeah, thank you, Harvey. Bye.
Bye.